afternoon, everybody. Welcome back from lunch. I know we are on a very tight schedule because we're running behind, and we're going to try assist the organizers by at least keeping to time, if not saving them a minute or two. We'll do our best. And I'd like to thank my panel members. I'm going to introduce you to the panel, and then we'll have some conversations with the panel members. And if there's time, I will be able to have the opportunity to take maybe one or two questions from the audience as well. So this panel discussion is mapping and exploring Africa's critical minerals, unlocking the continent's resource potential. I'm Professor Nikki Wagner from the University of Johannesburg, the Department of Geology, and a director of an NRF DSI Center of Excellence on critical minerals and energy. I'd like to introduce our first panelist here, Mr. Moses Mabuza. He's the CEO of the Council for Geosciences in South Africa. Sitting next to him is Mr. Mongweri Sibanda. He's from the Ministry of Mines and Mining Development in Zimbabwe.
Yes.
And then our two gentlemen, sorry, we're sitting them a little bit far away. Our two gentlemen here are from Mozambique, Mr. Elias Xavier Daudi, who's the Director General of the National Mining Institute of Mozambique, and Mr. Candido Rangero, who's the National Director of Mines, is from the Ministry of Mines and Geology in Mozambique, and they are kindly assisted by the High Commissioner of Mozambique, Maria Manuela dos Santos Lucas, who's very kindly stepped in as an informal translator. So we will do our best to pose the questions. So just to set the scene, during this panel discussion, we want to focus on the economic geology aspects related to mapping and finding these resources, finding these critical raw materials that we've been discussing all morning. I'm also not just focusing on critical raw materials, also the strategic minerals, and that discussion has come up again and again. We must understand what is critical, what is strategic, what does Africa need? What can Africa produce? Africa, we all know, hosts a wealth of minerals, including coal, manganese, PGM, diamonds, let alone the lithium and copper, cobalt. The list is extensive, vanadium. But when seeking this vast amount of critical raw materials that we're going to need for the just energy transition, we need to do a lot of exploration. We need to do greenfield and brownfield exploration. And geoscience councils and ministries of mines need to plan and assist us on how are we going to get there. Essentially, we almost have to have a crystal ball. For example, 10, 15 years ago, if someone found a lithium deposit, no interest, no need for that. Today, we cannot keep up with the demand, but it can take about 10 years from finding a deposit to actually opening a productive mine, and we're running very far behind the curve. So I'm going to ask the first question, and it's the same question to all panelists. Maybe you can just elaborate a bit on your countries, because we've got representation from South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Mozambique. In your countries, can you elaborate a bit on what is happening with regards to mapping and exploration in the countries, both for critical and strategic minerals? We'll start here with my colleague, Mr. Mabuza.
Thank you, Prof. So I think it's important to clarify that in the mining value chain, it all starts with geology. We call it pre-competitive collection of information that gives you a sense of what you have, where it is, and so on and so forth. And I see a lot of empirical evidence that is thrown on the extent of exploration in Australia and Canada and other developed economies. But what hasn't been said is how much those countries invest in geology. And I choose the word invest, not spend, because it all starts with a nation that decides that it is going to invest in its geoscientific program, the mapping that you are talking about. And we did a comparative study of how much geology is invested in Africa a square kilometer relative to these nations that seem to be attracting so much exploration. And it was quite appalling to see that in Africa we spend less than $5 a square kilometer on average, and these countries spend in excess of $65 a square kilometer. Now you can immediately see with that quantum of differentiation of the expenditure and investment in geology that you get what you invest in, and therefore you should not be surprised when you see declining exploration activities and all kinds of things that we say. And fortunately for our country, in the past 5-6 years, we have engaged and brought this to the attention of our authorities, and we have started to set aside dedicated resources for mapping. We had found when we started that the mapping at the requisite scale for today's exploration of 1 in 50,000, the onshore coverage was below 3%. We have ramped this up in the past 5 years. We are now marginally above 12% coverage. So we are getting there. And in the process of mapping, and we were looking at it as a country at the beginning, but as you know, geology does not recognize any political boundaries. If you look at Namibia, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and so on, all of us have geological continuity, and the extent to which we can collaborate and work together to augment the regionalized view of the geological mapping program will begin to give a sense of what we have. Offshore, we have not even begun to map. Our knowledge of marine geology is totally insignificant. Our coverage as we speak of what we currently have in the exclusive economic zone that goes 150 nautical miles into the ocean is below 0.3%. Now, the blue economy obtains a whole new future for all types of resources that the country, the region, the continent, and the world needs. I see that some countries are going to the moon to do exploration, and I think it's a little bit too fast to go to the moon. Let's start right here in the ocean. Let's start mapping our ocean and see what these critical minerals are. And the critical minerals are not only for energy, they're for energy, they're for food security, they're for industrial sector, they're for military and security, and they have broad applications. And it all starts with geology. My parting shot, Prof, is if you don't know what you have, then you cannot manage it. And therefore, a deliberate decision to invest in geology will make African leaders know what they have, so they can develop informed policy trajectories that are based on scientific evidence, that are based on the reality, not the rhetoric that Africa has lots of minerals. What is lots of minerals? Until you put your confidence on your geoscientists, and you don't have a shortage of geoscientists, they are available, they are capable, and they will help the nations to know what they have, so then they can make choices that they wish to make. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mabuza. Yes, several very important points you've raised. One or two of them I hope we will have time to get back to during this discussion.
Sure.
Mr. Sabanda, can you elaborate a little bit what is happening in Zimbabwe with regards to mapping and resource identification?
Yes, thank you very much for giving me the platform. As my colleague, Mr. Musa, has said, the reasons for mapping is necessary. We have information, geological information in Zimbabwe. I am from the Zimbabwe Geological Survey Department, which is a department of the Ministry of Mines and Mining Development. So the mandate for the department is to collect the information, gather information by either mapping or collection of information, mapping from the Geological Survey itself, using its own resources and its own staff, or getting involved into exploration companies that are exploring at private level. So we get all that together and archive at the Geological Survey. And with that, we have 3 levels of information, which we categorize according to the level of information that we have. First is the mineral resources series that we have. That is the one that gives you a bird's eye view of our country. If you are coming from wherever in the continent or internationally, you get to the series for first-hand information. There isn't much in the series, but they will give you point coordinates, just point indicators to where you may go for the minerals that you're looking at. Say maybe you're looking for lithium. You would use the base metal series. In our case, which is mineral resource series number 22. That will give you an indication of all the points in the country where lithium mineralization is. And then from there, you can then get to the second level, which we refer to as the second category for our information. That now is coming from the bulletins and the short reports that we have for areas that have been mapped, areas that have been explored. So in the bulletins, we have text bulletins. We also have maps that accompany those texts. So from the first information that you get from the series, you go to the bulletin. Now you are getting more information on the same point which you got from the first level. Then you can work on that. If it's not sufficient, we have the third level of information, which are the technical files. The technical files will give mostly information on individual deposits, specific. Some, of course, they are named by the geologists who first discovered those minerals, be it lithium, be it cobalt, be it whatever mineral. Then you can get the maps. If there was mining before, history, you have the chance to use our library. The library has all the information that for the mining activities that took place in the past and or information that is currently happening right now. We also have exploration programs that are going on, but for now, mostly they're done by private companies. They do it by way of application of EPOs. You apply for an exclusive prospecting order, you're given an order for a specific area that you want to explore, and you can indicate in those, in that application, the minerals that you want to explore for. Then you can go ahead and do your exploration, but in the process, you will be working hand in hand with the staff from the Zimbabwe Geological Survey for Ministry of Mines and Mining Development. So that the information that you are acquiring as you are doing your exploration, you can use it for your mine development, as well as we will be archiving it for future use in case you decide you no longer want to use the same area, maybe you want to change to go to another area, at least we will have information on that particular area. So in essence, those are the 3 levels that we have, and all that information is housed at the Geological Survey.
And I'm probably going to come back to a question, but is that information available to the general population, or would you have to apply and get permission and pay for the different levels?
No, all the information is available to the general public. Anyone, you walk into our library, it's free. If you want, you can just, from the first series that I mentioned, you will choose which series you want. You just work with the librarian, then can direct you. If you want a soft copy to use, they will, you will have then to pay for the soft copy. Even if it's the hard copy, you will pay. That is, if you want to take the information with you. But if you want to just use and leave, you just get into the library, search for whichever books or bulletins, technical files you want, read, use, and you leave.
Excellent, thank you very much. Moving to our colleagues from Mozambique, could you elaborate a bit on the mapping and exploration that is currently taking place, managed by the surveys or by the ministry itself? Who would like to go first?
Boa tarde a todos. Muito obrigado pela oportunidade que nos dão para falar pouco do mapeamento ou dos serviços geológicos de Moçambique.
So thank you very much for inviting him and be here in this panel to speak about the mapping and survey.
Pedimos desculpas por estarmos a utilizar a tradução, talvez fosse melhor por questão de tempo nós falarmos diretamente em inglês, mas Moçambique, como sabem, é um país de expressão portuguesa. Podemos conversar em inglês, mas para fazer apresentações já exige algum profissionalismo.
He's apologizing because he cannot speak in English, but in Portuguese, as you know, we are a Portuguese-speaking country.
Falando do mapeamento geológico em Moçambique, devo dizer que Moçambique é um país júnior, portanto, no contexto da mineração.
Speaking about the mapping, geological mapping, as you know, Mozambique is, speaking about the geological mapping, as you know, Mozambique is really junior on this subject.
Recuando 20 anos atrás, aquilo que era o potencial geológico de Moçambique era quase desconhecido.
20 years ago, what is the geological resources of Mozambique, it was really unknown.
É por isso que o Ministério dos Recursos Minerais e Energia levou a cabo um grande projeto junto do Banco Mundial, que era para termos um projeto de mapeamento a nível de todo o país.
That's why the Ministry of Mineral Resources and Energy, with the partnership with the World Bank, they've really started the project of mapping, the geological mapping in Mozambique.
Este mapeamento de base permitiu conhecer, não em detalhe, mas aquilo que eram as potencialidades do país e, através disso, mobilizar investidores que estivessem interessados, portanto, nos recursos que foram descobertos no país ou mapeados no país.
With this project, Mozambique, at least we know, not in details, but at least we know what we have in Mozambique as far as mineral resources concerned.
Como é do conhecimento de todos, qualquer mapeamento portanto, exige recursos muito intensivos.
As you know, any mapping, geological mapping, requires a high amount of resources.
É por isso que, para o mapeamento de detalhe ou conhecimento de detalhe, nós convidamos as empresas para que efetivamente possam fazer esse trabalho.
That's why, for Mozambique, we invite normally the big companies for them to help us to survey and try to see what you have in Mozambique in terms of resources.
A informação que foi recolhida no mapeamento de base, toda ela, portanto, é integrada no nosso sistema de informação mineral.
All the survey and the information that we had from this basic mapping, it's in a database of the Ministry of Mineral Resources and Energy.
De tal ordem que qualquer investidor que esteja interessado num determinado, portanto, mineral, tem toda a informação que ele precisa no nosso sistema de informação mineral.
That's why that any investor that wanted to invest in Mozambique on mineral resources, they have this database. They can consult the database of the Ministry of Mineral Resources and Energy.
Portanto, estão disponíveis mapas geológicos à escala de 1 por 1 milhão.
They are available. Mapping?
Mapas geológicos
Geological mapping of the scale of 1
for 1 million.
1 million.
Yes. Também temos mapas à escala de 1 por 50 mil em áreas potenciais.
And there is also from the scale 1 to 50?
1 to 50,000.
50,000, okay, yes. See how he knows how to translate?
Mas nós sabemos que precisamos ir ainda mais de detalhe, mas conforme eu disse, esses detalhes exigem mais recursos que nós ou que o país não possui ainda, portanto, para ir até a esse detalhe.
No, that's why that Mozambique is aware that we need to have this information in details, but as we said, we don't have these resources to have this information in details.
Falando dos minerais críticos, também o mapeamento de base permitiu verificar que o país, portanto, a região norte e a região centro, são ricos, portanto, ou têm pelo menos ocorrências desse tipo de minerais.
As far as critical minerals, in this geological mapping, no, the basic geological mapping, we realized that the regions, the two regions, the northern part of Mozambique and the central part of Mozambique, they're really rich in these critical minerals.
E isso é consubstanciado com aquilo que é a presença, infelizmente, de mineradores artesanais que em algum momento escavam, portanto, esse tipo de minerais, pelo menos as rochas que encaixam esse tipo de minerais.
That's why we see or witness a lot of artisanal miners on those areas. He spoke about something very technical. What happened?
Artisanal miners that are digging
The artisanal
these
miners.
minerals, like lepidolite, spodumena, so.
May I ask Mr. Dowdy, do you have anything to add?
Muito obrigado. Também quero aproveitar esta oportunidade para agradecer o convite que foi endereçado a Moçambique para estar neste primeiro summit sobre os minerais críticos.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank the opportunity of being here, being invited to this summit of critical minerals.
Tópico que está na moda no dia de hoje.
It's a topic that is, I don't know, sexy. Normally this is.
O meu colega acabou de informando o que nós temos e os minerais críticos existentes no nosso país.
Now, the director has also informed all the panel here about the critical mineral that we have in our country.
Neste momento, para além do conhecimento que nós temos, a partir do mapeamento básico que fizemos, o Instituto Nacional de Minas tem levado a cabo o mapeamento na escala 1 por 50 mil.
Okay. Despite the basic geological mapping that was done, but also the Institute of Geology,
Instituto Nacional de Minas.
The Minas, okay, of mining. The National Institute of Mining also is doing this survey from the scale of 1 to 50,000.
em áreas potenciais, incluindo também o levantamento aerogeofísico de detalhe.
including the
Levantamento aerogeofísico,
English.
airborne geophysics,
You see?
detalhe.
The geophysics.
Para além desses trabalhos, eu queria complementar a dissertação do meu colega da África do Sul, que falou sobre a necessidade de os serviços geológicos de África serem potenciados em recursos humanos e recursos financeiros para poderem fazer o trabalho profundo para o conhecimento desses minerais.
I think that he really wanted to agree with what the colleague from South Africa have said, that the geological sector has to be provided with the resources, financial and human resources.
Tal como estamos a falar de minerais críticos, em alguns países africanos, as condições de trabalho dos funcionários, dos técnicos, dos geólogos é crítica.
Said that as we are talking about the critical minerals in some countries in our continent, the working conditions of the technical experts, of all the workers that are doing this, they're working on this area, is really critical also.
Os nossos ministros de manhã tocaram este ponto, colocando os países africanos para também poderem alocar recursos para que nós possamos estudar com detalhe os mesmos recursos, os minerais críticos.
Yeah, he said, as the ministers in the morning have said, that there is a need for the African continent to allocate funds for the working conditions, but also for the survey and mapping of all the critical resources that we have in the continent.
E também tem que haver a troca de informação entre os países vizinhos para que possamos capitalizar tanto a informação existente entre tanto esses países.
There is also a critical need for the African countries, especially the neighbors, to exchange information on this area.
Por enquanto, termino por aqui.
So, thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think, just hearing the panel members, mapping seems to be happening. And mapping and information seems to be available to maybe junior miners or people just interested in finding potential. But between the mapping and the actual resource conversion to reserve, maybe I can just ask, there's 2 points I want to pick up. One is on barriers to actually progressing from having the map to actually having a mine. One is the barrier, and the second point that you might want to address, the other barrier, or something that's equally as critical as the minerals themselves, is the skills. And maybe you could elaborate a little bit more, especially for young geologists, how to attract young geologists. So I've put 2 questions out there, but let's start with the barrier, from mapping to actually having a mine, and then should you wish to also comment on the critical skills needed. Mr. Mabuza.
Thanks, Prof. Prof, there are numerous barriers that we have identified. But the one key one I wanted to focus on today is the disconnect between the geological potential and the finance sector deeming exploration to be high risk. Now, you sit and we go through the mining reform at the dawn of our democratic dispensation. We introduce the transformative agenda and the participation of historically disadvantaged South Africans and Africans as very key democratic program. And they obtain the information, they are issued with prospecting rights, and guess what? They can't do anything because there is a a lack of appetite on financing for exploration. And the attitude of financiers is simply that this is high risk. Now, I have a solution for the finance sector, is they have not evaluated the efficacy with which the risk can be reduced with the appropriate utilization of geological instruments. You are able to significantly reduce that risk. In fact, it makes every other sector look like it doesn't have returns if you invest at the early stages of exploration. We also looked, but we looked at it through the prism of national investment in geology, still at the pre-competitive stages. And that for every $1 that the state invests in geology, you should be able to measure $5 private sector and exploration investment in a period of 5 to 7 years. And when this turns into mines and particularly fulfilling the gluttonous demand for these critical minerals, you are looking at a ratio of 1 to 5 to 125 in 20 plus years. Now, who in the world gives you returns of those magnitude? Now, bring your geoscientists closer, work with them, they reduce the risk, and they're able to turn things that at surface value look like absolute high risk when the future depends on how well and the prism that you look at it. Of course, that links to your second question, Prof, because that requires for a particular specialized set of skills. And so strategic partnerships between state organs such as ourselves, the academia, and the private sector to be deliberate on skills development, in my view, is something that we should be deliberate and purposeful about. Yeah, no, your questions limited me, Prof, so I'll stop there.
I'll come back to you just
I
now
have
for a
few
last
more
point.
things, yes, let's allow.
Okay.
Let's allow other
Mr.
colleagues.
Sabanda, from the perspective of Zimbabwe.
Yes, it's true. Financial barriers are actually haunting most of our African countries. Exploration is searching. You are searching for a mineral, or for minerals. So you need money to search. You don't just go to where it is with your money and you get. So you may need vast amounts of money, sometimes the tune of billions, to drill, to maybe check whether there is oil, there is gas, but doesn't follow that when you drill maybe to 5 kilometers down, you're going to get the oil. You may spend that 5 billion, you may spend that 10 billion, and you find at the end of the exploration program, there is nothing economic, there is nothing worth even one million. So it requires a really holistic approach, I suppose, that the government should come together with the private sector to say, this is what we want to do. Yes, we know it involves spending a lot of money in terms of skills development and financing the project. Knowing that when you finance the project, the outcome is either you win or you lose. So yeah, basically, I would just center on the finances.
Yeah, the finances are the biggest barrier.
Yes.
The finances as well for the exploration as well as the skills development for the people needed. Turning to our colleagues from Mozambique, perhaps Mr. Rangiro, you can address the question about potential barriers, and Mr. Daudi, you could probably address the question about the critical skills, the human capacity skills, if that's okay.
Muito obrigado. Talvez eu vou dar aqui um pequeno exemplo, só para se ter a noção, portanto, daquilo que foi o nosso grande constrangimento para, portanto, ter os geólogos, portanto, no Ministério ou na Direção Nacional de Geologia.
He's going to give you an example, a small example, of the challenge that they had, just to have young people on his Department of Geology.
Moçambique, lá para os anos, portanto, para os anos 2000, 1990, a única universidade que nós tínhamos formava por ano não mais que 10 geólogos, não mais que isso por ano, não é?
From the year, as you know, we had our independence in 75, but from 1990 to 2000, the only university that we had in Mozambique, it was only training per year 10 geologists.
Not training, but forming, formar geólogos.
All training, even it's not even, it's a training for geologists, only 10 geologists per year.
E quando foi o boom, portanto, dos recursos minerais, já devido a esse problema, ao mapeamento de base que nós fizemos, e apareceram as empresas, né, que estavam interessadas em fazer a pesquisa, né, dos recursos minerais, portanto, que o país dispunha. Então, esses geólogos que eram formados por ano eram todos absorvidos pelas empresas e até antes mesmo deles serem formados eram, portanto, contratados pelas empresas.
And then when after this mapping that we did, the geology mapping, we discovered that we have some minerals and we had a lot of companies that they came in. And then all these geologists, they were taken by the private sector.
Even before they ended the course. Yes. Então, isto, de fato, fez com que o Ministério desenhasse um plano de formação intensivo, né? E esta manhã dizia-se que nós, muitas das vezes, olhamos para os países de muito longe, ao invés de olhar para os países vizinhos, que têm, de fato, esta capacidade de formar quadros para a área mineira.
And then the Ministry of Mineral Resources and Energy, they had to design a planning for training. And then he said, normally we look far away for training our people, and we forget that we have our neighbor countries also with all the knowledge that they can also help us to train our people.
Voltando às barreiras, uma das principais barreiras que nós temos para desenvolver a atividade de pesquisa é, portanto, é financeiro, porque, como nós sabemos, a pesquisa é extremamente cara, exige recursos extremamente elevados e esses recursos financeiros o Estado não tem. É por isso que nós licenciamos as áreas e as empresas fazem a pesquisa.
Because one of the challenges for the research, pesquisa research, no?
Yeah.
Research. One of the challenges for the research in this area of minerals, it's a financial issue because it really requires a lot of financial resources for the research. So one of the strategy of Mozambique is that they're using the private companies or the private enterprise that they're investing on that area for them to help on the research.
Também estamos a pensar em um Estado, portanto, nós como Estado, criarmos uma empresa que se responsabilize pela pesquisa. Nós vimos esse exemplo com os nossos colegas no Zimbábue, que tem uma empresa, portanto, que faz, por exemplo, a pesquisa. E o Estado tem que alocar recursos para essa empresa para que efetivamente ela possa funcionar.
Learning from the experience of Zimbabwe, the government of Mozambique is trying, they are starting now to see if they can create an institution, a government institution for the research because they have learned from Zimbabwe.
Okay,
Thank you.
that's a great point, because I think that's part of this conversation, is what can we learn from other countries and where can we all join together. Mr. Dowdy?
Sim, em relação à questão de técnicos, o meu colega focou um bocadinho, mas eu iria dizer que a área mineira é complexa, requer investimentos, não só para pesquisa, mas também para recursos humanos.
He said his colleague has already spoke a little bit about the skills, but he was saying that the mineral sector is a very complex area. It really require high amounts of funds, even just for training skills.
É diferente da agricultura. Agricultura, eu posso fazer a lavoura este ano e no fim do ano posso colher aquilo que eu quero produzir, o milho, por exemplo.
He said it's different from the agriculture. Agriculture is too fast. No, we can just cultivate today and then we harvest next year. But the mineral sector, then it takes many
Portanto,
years.
para nós podermos formar pessoas, mesmo depois de terminar as universidades, precisamos no mínimo 2, 3 anos para as pessoas poderem se afirmar como técnicos que devem levar projetos, que devem fazer investigação para contribuir para os nossos países.
He said even after the university, we still need more than 2 to 3 years to have the workers, with all the knowledge of that sector.
O meu colega falou sobre a saída ou as empresas privadas têm recrutado muitos experts porque têm condições para poderem manter esses técnicos nas suas empresas, enquanto que o Estado não.
He said his colleague spoke about the private sector, that they really absorb all our experts because there are conditions, they have good salaries and all the conditions, but the government or the public sector doesn't have that.
Portanto,
those
todos
conditions.
esses aspectos devemos ter em conta para que mantenhamos quadros técnicos capacitados para poderem fazer a investigação.
So the appeal is that really the public sector, they have to invest on this issue, especially to have the skills for the research.
Porque é a investigação de base que o Estado deve fazer para minimizar o risco de investimentos das empresas privadas que querem investir nos nossos países.
Because the government or the public sector, they have to invest on the research so that they can minimize the cost even for the investor that they want to come and invest in the country. Thank you.
So I certainly can see that I think everyone agrees.
Yeah.
Critical skills are going to be a barrier to us exploring for the critical minerals. And especially the difference between a salary in a private sector compared to the salaries in the ministry or the councils or the surveys, there is a disparity. But unless we can involve and get these multilateral agreements between industry and the surveys, for example, in the ministries, we actually might have a very big barrier. So despite all the potential, we might not be able to deliver. And I was asked to sort of keep this a little bit shorter, if possible, just to try to catch up time, but we're already almost over time on ourselves. I would like to just offer if there's one burning question from the audience. Does someone have a burning question on this topic? Otherwise, do feel free to get hold of the... Oh, there's a question. Either you can shout very loudly, or do you want to come forward to the platform? Okay, so I'm just going to repeat the question to make sure everybody heard it. So the question was directed to Mr. Mabuza. At the Northern Cape Critical Minerals meeting composers, there was an announcement about money that would be made available for exploration. And the question's being posed to Mr. Mabuza, how is that progressing?
Hey, I might lose my job here, so let me answer this very carefully, very slowly. Thank you, Baba Soli. That question emphasizes our consensus here on one of the critical barriers to exploration, which is access to financial resources in an environment where risk can be reduced. I'm glad that there is a later panel with all the financial gurus who I am sure they will have the answers to this question and they will make further commitments on how to solve this problem. Part of the recommendations that we then made to government as a temporary bridge to this challenge was to create a junior exploration fund to be administered by the IDC, governed jointly by the department and the IDC, and for the Council for Geoscience to provide technical support. I am informed that the intricacies of that governance, as you can imagine, it is going to be a very interesting uncharted territories intervention, as it were. So you've got to work out the modalities and the governance of that exploration fund rather meticulously. And so the gurus have been doing that. I would love for them to account on how far we are. But we didn't wait for the fund because the fund also needs the funders and the sources of funding and so on and so forth. So what we then thought we would do is to invoke what we call a notion of first user advantage, wherein we are piloting this model as the Council for Geoscience. In the past year, we've identified one company for now, and our intention is maybe in the next year or 18 months, ramp it up to about 4 or 5, because we are given a task to recatalyze exploration, as it were. And we want to demonstrate that our geology as a country has not been, excuse me, our geology remains, notwithstanding 150 years of official mining, our geology indicates that we have not begun to tap into the resources that we have. We became comfortable with the mineralizing system that we knew, like the Wits Gold Basin, the Bushveld Thickness Complex, and a few others. But the more details we look at, the more we realize that the potential is much greater. And instead of sitting here and talking about it, we want to demonstrate it. We'll soon announce the results of the first partnership. It will show how we have taken a zero rand asset into a multi-billion dollar asset in less than 18 months.
Thank you very much for that. That sounds very positive. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut short, well, not cutting short. We've actually used our 50 minutes completely, and I'm sorry to the facilitator that I didn't manage to cut it down. If you've got a one-floor elevator pitch as your final statement, anybody would like a final 10-second statement just to close off the panel? Mr. Sibanda, 10 seconds?
Okay, yeah. It has become apparent that it's the finances that is required for all this to happen as we want. So think about investing in geology. Because for mining to be there, it must be geology first.
Yeah, geology first, definitely. It all starts with the geology. And I know there's a financial panel, I think later this afternoon. Hopefully they're here. Take the geologists first. 10 seconds.
Obrigado. Duas palavras apenas. Temos a visão, né, daquilo que nós queremos na área geológica mineira. Então, se nós queremos levar a cabo uma pesquisa a nível dos nossos países, os governos têm que perceber que têm que alocar recursos para essa pesquisa. Senão, não estaremos a fazer absolutamente nada. Muito obrigado.
Just two words. He says that I think the consensus here is that our government, they have to take seriously the issue of financial resources if you want to do something in this area.
Yep. And Mr. Dowdy, everything okay? Well, thank you very much to my panel members. I think we could have sat here all afternoon. But I think we've got some information that is usable for the audience. Starts with the geology, and financial is a barrier to make sure we've got critical skills so we can get those critical minerals. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Prof.
Muito obrigado, Excelência.